Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about how to fabricate steel. And there are two ways to have steel fabricated. One is to do it yourself, and the other one is to supply an unknown amount of money to a steel fabrication company and have them fabricate it for you. But being that I have the tools to do this, I do it myself. And then we're going to talk about how you can fabricate or fundamentally change a country vis-a-vis how America has been transformed. But first, let's talk about steel fabrication. The first thing you're going to have to get is some steel plate. Then after you have the steel plate, you're going to need a burning torch, which I have behind me, and you're going to cut these pieces of steel into the sizes that are necessary. Now this steel is rusty, so the surfaces had to be grinded down in order to paint them. That's one thing that needs to be done. And then I had to cut holes into the steel for two reasons. When I plan on moving that container, and I'm going to remove the bucket to do that. But I needed something to put chain through or on in order to pull the container and slide the container over and around so I can dig those 4 holes. So I didn't have that, and then this throw, which throws the bucket, expands the bucket and curls the bucket, this snapped over here. So I grinded this down on a 45-degree bevel and welded it around the perimeter, and then added onto it another 1/4 inch. And then on both sides of the throw, or the rod, I'm going to put plates. There's the plate on the other side. The plate on the other side already exists. So this piece of steel is going to go here, and then these hooks for this double. It's a double pick. It's a double sling. It has 2 lifting hooks, and this is the ring that would be the center. You could use it one way or reverse it, balikad, the other way. So you get this piece and you cut these pieces to shape, and then you polish them with this grinder here. And you polish down all the edges. Now this is an unfinished piece right here. So after you burn it, it looks like this, and it has what is called slag on it. You take these pieces and you knock the slag off of it, and you bevel the outsides so that you don't have any sharp edges for your hands, and also eventually this might be used for rope or for chain to put through. So this piece goes on this side of the throw, or what is called the yoke. This part here is the yoke, and I'm not real sure what this is called, this part here, but this is the part that meets the bucket that's going to come off, and then the hooks are going to go in here. So you can either use this chain like this, and pull from a single place, or you can put this ring through, chain it to here, and pull with the 2 hooks. That's one way in which this could be used. And the other way in which this could be used is to take a chain like this and get the end of the chain, and then once this is welded together, you put this chain through here like this and like that. Okay, so this is a finished product, and then you have to grind off the paint and the rust in order to get a good solid weld. Being that I'm using a very small welder and I'm not so good at welding, I grind everything down. It gives me the biggest advantage. So that's how you fundamentally change a piece of steel into a fabricated product. But what you don't understand about America and how it was fundamentally changed is that in the year 2008, Mr. Obama was elected president. Now, I'm going to ask my subscribers, who remembers in the first 3 months of Mr. Obama's presidency that the Federal Reserve printed $17 billion worth of money? It's not available on the internet anymore. Any link or any article that was connected with that concept is gone. Okay, so I remember it. And the reason I remember it is because a friend of mine named Gary, I won't tell you his last name, worked for Pitney Bowes. And we were talking one day. He was called to Washington just about the day before we had this conversation. He was called to Washington, D.C. because he worked on the Pitney Bowes postage machines, and he was an expert when it came to something that had to do with printing. Okay, and when about 6 or 7 months later, we lived in close proximity to each other, he told me they printed $17 billion worth of money. And I remember that Mr. Obama had to hire several hundred people to keep the printing presses moving at a pace where the money could be printed. But here is what the fundamental change of America and how it happened. The money disappeared. The money was never accounted for, to my knowledge. Now, if someone knows differently than me, please leave a link in the description box below. It is my belief, and I can't prove this, but it's my belief, that during Mr. Obama's presidency, no one ever challenged him on anything, including the birth certificate. And even Sheriff Joe Pryor and Mike Zullo, who every 3 months came up with a new concept. We have more proof. We have more proof that the birth certificate was forged. We have more proof. It's now 9.5 years, and they never released anything of any value. Because I believe that Sheriff Joe Pryor, as much as this might sound crazy, I believe he was also paid off, and Mike Zullo, but with part of the $17 billion. Now, when I said no one ever challenged him, no one in Congress ever challenged anything that he wanted to do. He won a Nobel Peace Prize, and then he started a war, and then I think he had the only presidency in a long time that there was never any peace or never any war not being engaged in during his presidency. So no one ever challenged him, and here's my belief. Now, I can't be wrong, but I believe that $17 billion was printed, and then each and every person in key positions were given X amount of dollars and instructions to do whatever it was that they needed to do to enhance Mr. Obama. Hello, Nanay. Mayan hapon. Salamat. I believe that Mr. Obama put this money somewhere, somebody transferred this money into key positions in politics. Now, considering that we're going to go back to Sheriff Joe Pryor, so considering he never provided any proof, and every 3 months for 8 years he was going to do that, I believe that the money paid was to keep him silent, and then he had an option, which is probably not the best option in the world. He could either go forward with this birth certificate thing, which even Mr. Trump said is unverified. Let's say, I'm going to be politically correct today because I'm a very politically correct guy. And then he backed down on that. Now, there has to be a reason he backed down on that. Now, whatever the reason, could it be money? Could it be extortion? Could it be pressure, political pressure? Could it be a deal that is going to be made in the future? Could be anyone or all of those things. But my belief is that the people that control this world control it from a much higher up, and everybody would agree with me, there's a much higher chain of command behind the presidency and the politicians and even the United Nations and the World Bank and the Federal Reserve. There's a higher up society, that which I have proven exists in my book, aka Angels on the Ark by Michael Fazio. And I've proven it. In fact, I am the only person in history to prove that there are secret societies that control this world. You all believe that to be true, but I provided the proof in my book, Angels on the Ark. I provided the proof that there are 3 main logos on the dollar bill that represent the 3 societies which are called independent states. One of those states is the Vatican. Another of those states is the Bank of England, the Square Mile of England, and the third one is Washington, D.C. Those are 3 separate individual states or countries within a country. They have their own rules, they have their own regulations. That's why there are 3 stars on the flag of the Vatican, the flag of the Square Mile of England, and I'm going by memory, and also of Washington, D.C. They call them country states. I forget the name. See, all the knowledge I have, I forget the basics. Okay, so those 3 people, those 3 entities, those 3 constructs are represented on the dollar bill, which is what I wrote in my book, which is 1,990 pages of proof. And I proved that the skull and bones depicted with the year 1832 and the number 322 in pictographic format is on the dollar bill. I proved that the owl, the Bohemian Grove owl, the great horned owl, is on the dollar bill opposing the skull and bones. And you can see that in my channel video. But I also proved that the Ark of the Covenant is on the dollar bill. And here's the kicker. Skull and Bones logos is inside the nose of a hog-nosed bat. The whole logos is not much bigger than the head of a pin, but when you explode it, expand it 400 or 500 times, it becomes clear as day. It's a skull and bones. It doesn't have a cross as a skull and bones, but the skull is comprised of bones. Therefore, it's a skull and bones. And the amount of dashes or dots in the mouth represented as teeth, and the lower teeth, the upper teeth, and the lines that comprise the eyes add up to 6 teeth, and 6 lines. That's 6, 6, 6, that's 18. Around the head of the skull are 3 contiguous lines. That represents the number 3. So you have 18 and 3, and then there are 2 white lines around the ears. So you have the number 1832. That's the skull and bones. Now the skull and bones is located as the nose, like that, of a hog-nosed bat. And the hog-nosed bat is an ancient symbol that represents the Skull and Bones Society. That's a very secret, that's what's inside, what I would believe is inside the inner sanctum. Now, proving that this is so, that the Skull and Bones Society used the pictures that I use for my dollar bill videos on their website. Not all of them, but one of them for sure, and it used to be 2. So, the picture of my logos that's on my channel video with the skull and bones with teeth is used in the Skull and Bones Society's website. Now, what does this mean? It means that I saw something that existed long before I was born, because it was put on the bill via Scribners, which made the plates that made the dollar bills back before 1935. But I believe those plates were made perhaps thousands of years ago, because this plan to fundamentally transform America is not a new plan. The plan, and this is what my research has in book and written about in the book, my research has brought me to the understanding that before the Great Pyramids were built, there was going to be a society that rose up, became almighty powerful, godlike, if you want, and then it would be destroyed. Just like I have a deep understanding of ancient cultures that go back 50 or 100 or 150,000 years ago, that were built up. The technology existed that we have today 100,000 years ago, and then through some sort of cataclysm or catastrophe, the society was destroyed. Now, you can believe that or not. You could just read my book as fiction, but I published it as non-fiction. Now, here is a little bit of something that gets my goat, because nobody in this world, and even though I have stated that I would wager $10,000, $50,000, and $100,000 at some point in my life, before I moved to the Philippines and before I lost all my properties in Florida, I had that money to wager. But nobody ever took even my small $10,000 wager. And we're talking about Eric H. Klein from George Washington University, who's supposed to be the world's leading expert on the Ark of the Covenant, which is the third pictograph I proved is on the dollar bill, by using forensic technology and how many points of a certain picture provided how many different sayings in the Bible, that each, and more specifically Exodus, each one of those pictographs on the dollar bill is described in Exodus in regards to the Bible. The 4 and 20 elders, they're on the dollar bill. The Alpha and the Omega is on the dollar bill. The Omega is around George Washington's head. No one sees that as the Omega symbol, but it's the perfect Greek Omega symbol. So this is all in my book. And as digressing back to Eric H. Klein, who's the world's leading expert, I presented him with this information. He ignored me totally. So then I sent him a 17-page letter challenging him to a public debate. He ignored me altogether. So it's not that what I discovered wasn't known beforehand. It's that the people that control this world know, they know that what I discovered is real. And one of the people I met when I first published my book was a fellow, I won't mention his name. He was brought up in a family of the Illuminati, and he said, Mike, he goes, you're very close to the truth. Not all the truth, but very close.